Welcome to another live edition of Promo Insiders, the Counselor podcast that covers the issues that matter most to the promotional products industry, from hard-hitting news to fun trends. I'm Teresa Hegel, Executive Editor of Digital Content at ASI, and today we're going to be talking about the future of events. And before we get started, I just want to mention that we have a sponsor, Maple Ridge Farms, and 3 people who comment are going to get a coffee cake. So be sure you contribute to the discussion, ask questions, share your experiences, and hopefully we'll have a nice, lively discussion. And now let me just introduce my guest. Today I'm joined by Barry Myers, founder of Get Geeked Media. Barry has a background in designing consumer-facing conferences and events, and most recently he launched Techfluence, a virtual event that connects tech brands to the media. So thanks for joining us today, Barry.
You're very welcome, Teresa. Thanks so much for having me.
So can you tell me a little bit more about your background and how you got started, working on events?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an experiential guy, as we say in the industry. I was actually a telecommunications lawyer for a few years, and as rewarding as that was, I had an opportunity to design a conference for Comdex, the old computer trade show, which at one point was, bigger than CES. And
I've been to CES, and that would be quite.
Yeah. This is the early 2000s, and they were kind of seeing the trends of the consumer technology category. I mean, consumer tech was really starting to become sexy and what have you. So they actually brought me on to design a conference program and an expo, part of the expo floor, addressing consumer-facing technology. It was the first time they'd ever done something like that. So we did that, and Comdex didn't last much longer after that. Not to, our program was pretty successful, but what happened was I met some really cool people there, and we got together and we came up with the concept for an event that became Digital Life. And that was the first event I really co-founded. And that was a 4-day event at the Javits Convention Center. And it was really, in a lot of respects, kind of the first consumer facing, the first real tech convention hall, trade show, exhibits, that let consumers in. Now, we also had we gave special priority to the press. As I tell companies all the time, it's not that the press isn't important anymore. It's just that you have these other, communities, influencers and enthusiasts that you really need to be engaging as well. And we were kind of the first ones to bring that to an event and acknowledge that and give companies an opportunity for face-to-face engagement with those communities. So we did that for a little while. That was actually produced by Ziff Davis. They purchased the event before we even launched it, and we became part of Ziff Davis Media. I ran that for 4 years, and around 2000, 2008, 2009, of course, the economy kind of imploded, and they canceled the show, even though it had 60,000 attendees the last year we ran it, and 250 exhibitors. But it was a challenging time for everyone. I left and I joined a really cool startup called Gadget.com, which was kind of like a Rotten Tomatoes or a Metacritic for gadgets, a community site, not a news site. And I created a little road show for them where we went around the country and companies exhibited at tabletops, and we invited consumers in each of these key cities to come in and check out the products. And that was super successful. Did that for a few years, and AOL acquired Gadget.com in 2013, and I spent about a year at AOL running the Engadget branded events. They own Engadget, the tech blog.
Okay.
And we did a bunch of events under the Engadget brand, and then I left to launch Get Geeked Media in 2014. And the mission statement there was really kind of, there had already been this existing tabletop event format for just the press, and here I'd carved out a niche, recognizing the importance of these other audiences, the influencers and the enthusiasts. So I kind of set out to kind of reinvent that tabletop event format to give companies a cost-effective, very easy to execute, no booths, they weren't in convention halls, opportunity to engage all 3 of those audiences. We did that for a few years. And then, of course, we all got locked down about 6 or 7 months ago.
Right. Something happened. I don't remember what.
That's when we started to look at virtual.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about this. You just wrapped up a virtual event recently, correct?
We launched our first virtual event under our Techfluence brand, which is actually a brand we launched last year to encompass some of the influencer marketing things we're doing in the consumer tech space with YouTubers and content creators. But we use that brand for the new virtual event as well, yeah.
So what did that entail? What are some of the differences between a virtual event like that and the in-person one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that our events are, primarily B2C, B to press and consumer.
Right.
So, the objectives of companies and of attendees too are very different. This isn't a conference. It's not, your senior vice president schmoozing with my senior vice president. So it's a very kind of specific type of an event. And, what we set out to do that other virtual events weren't doing as the pandemic hit and locked us all down and everybody started to pivot to virtual events, the existing virtual events were kind of very linear. They were very based on programming. They require you to sign in at a specific time and listen to a presentation or what have you. And what we wanted to do was kind of replicate the more free-form, spontaneous environment of a media event or a trade show for that matter, where the attendees, they come when the event is open, they come when the event starts, they come an hour into it, they come whenever they want, they move from booth to booth, visit with the companies they're interested in. They spend as much time with a company or as little time as the company. They're able to get the information they need to do their job, write about tech products. So it was a very different kind of mission we were on versus most of the virtual events. And we talked to a lot of press and I know a lot of press and my partner in this, who's actually the one kind of building the platform, is a journalist. And he, his experience drove a lot of those design decisions. And, the press were telling us, and the companies were telling us too, when it comes to showcasing our products in an environment that will hopefully generate buzz and awareness and coverage, this linear format wasn't really serving our purposes. So that was kind of the mission statement. Above and beyond that, what we also noticed right away or recognized right away was that the virtual environment, the digital environment also provided a lot of potential value that live events didn't. And we can get into that a little bit. But the first step was really digging in. Obviously, with so many events going virtual, this whole niche industry has popped up. So we looked at a lot of different platforms, looking for one that was, scalable and reliable. We weren't so concerned with the kind of fancy UI, the fancy avatars. We didn't really, as long as the objectives we set out and we're trying to help our attendees and our exhibitors accomplish could be accomplished. We weren't looking for, a screen that looked like a little trade show hall with that didn't really compel us. There's a lot of cool stuff out there like that, but we wanted infrastructure, we wanted reliability, we wanted scalability. So it really began with, the search for the right platform.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not the bells and whistles; it's the actually being able to make a connection between the two sides. That's kind of the important part.
It's being able to make a connection, but more so to that kind of mission statement 1B, which is making sure that we were working with a platform that provided a lot of value that you wouldn't otherwise get at a live event. Then it was really looking into kind of the robustness of the platform and the different ways we could leverage the platform, understanding that, that first mission of allowing brands, our exhibitors and our attendees to really have, what we kind of call the high touch person-to-person interaction that they get at a live press event, a live media event versus a conference. But then second to that, a close second was really making sure to leverage the platform and making sure it was robust enough to provide the tools to, for instance, when an attendee accesses one of our virtual booths, they can download press materials, they can initiate a group chat, they can initiate a video chat, they can fill out a special form that allows them to request a product for them to review and just have that kind of automated and collected in the background. And not only leveraging the platform for the interaction itself, but critically important, finding a platform that really collected all this information on the back end. I mean, we joke about, the typical media event, the exhibitors go back to their office and they're sorting through a stack of business cards. And, what we were looking for and what we found was a platform that allowed them to go back to their office and click open a dashboard and not only see who came to their booth and how long they stayed, but what did they do? Did they download a press material? Did they enter the video chat? And those are just, crazy cool, valuable things that, that live events, can't account for.
Well, that's really cool. So I also want to open this up to our viewers right now. Sure. I'm curious about like what kind of virtual events you guys have seen, because I know there's been a lot that have been done, in the industry, the promo products industry, and just beyond. And I'm curious to see if any of you guys have been to any virtual events, what you think has worked well, what has not worked so well, what you would like to see. So if you want to comment, that would be great, and we will talk about that. And as I mentioned before, Maple Ridge Farms is sponsoring this podcast, and 3 of the commenters today are going to receive a coffee cake. So, please feel free to, pipe up during the whole thing. But let's talk some more about virtual events. So I really like the idea you were talking about, that dashboard, all that data that you're collecting from this, because if it's something that's online, if it's virtual, like it should be much easier to get that data. So it makes sense to collect it and for the exhibitors to be able to use that easily.
Yeah, interestingly, we haven't seen a ton of other events. Now, there haven't been a ton of events with, kind of our approach and our mission of replicating that media event environment. But to the extent we're seeing them pop up, we're honestly not seeing a ton of focus, at least as we kind of, research the competition. We're actually not seeing a lot of focus on that. And wow, when we, took our exhibitors through the analytics report on debriefs after the event, which is something that's really important, they were just blown away.
Mm-hmm. So what are some other best practices when it comes to virtual events? Like, what are some things that you need to think about? Because obviously it's a different mindset, I think, than the typical event.
Well, I think, best practices, number one is find the right platform. And that takes time. And luckily for me, my partner, Alfred Poor, did that. We have a spreadsheet with a ton of difference, and he got on calls and, he did demos, and you really have to find the right platform in the context of what the objectives are for your attendees and your exhibitors.
Right. I'm going to cut you off really quick because we have a question from Nicole Brennan, and she wants to know if you could share what the platform you went with is.
Yeah, sure, Nicole. We used On24, which is really the industry leader, which has been around. It's not a kind of newbie. Some of the newbies look great, and they really, from a kind of visual standpoint, do a terrific job. But On24 are what some of the real major global tech brands are using for their events, and so that was the one we used.
Okay, and picking a platform is important. What are some other best practices?
So then I think the other real critical thing is that we worked super hard on is educating your attendees and your exhibitors. So, this is new stuff, and our virtual booths are very robust. And, like I said before, there are, several different actions that the attendee can take. And that's important because we did design this so that the attendee really drove the engagement. The attendee could pop into a booth and grab press materials and maybe the exhibitor an email or fill out that product review request form and buzz out of there and go visit another booth. They didn't have to engage in a video chat or a group chat. And that we did purposefully to, simulate what happens at a live media event. If you're staffing a table at one of these media events, you'll have attendees who come up and just grab your press release and kind of, move on, don't make eye contact because they don't want to have a conversation. And then you'll have others, hey, how are you? What are you showing tonight?
Yeah.
So we wanted to let them drive that, but it's new, and there's a lot of, again, different actions an attendee can take in our booth. And for what it's worth, the exhibitor isn't really even looking at the booth, right? They have a back end, what we call a presentation manager in our system. So it was really critical to educate both of them. I mean, at one of our live events, I've never, the press show up, hey, here you go. There's signage. They can see which company is which. They, they've received advanced communications about who will be there and what type of products they'll be showcasing, so they'll know. And we did all that kind of traditional stuff, but then we actually created a booth guide for them. And if they wanted to jump on a little onboarding demo, they could schedule a demo. And we did walkthroughs in advance of the event with each of our exhibitors. And then again, we did a walkthrough after to kind of show them the analytics. So in this environment, especially when you're doing something kind of as robust as we did, educating everybody so they know what to expect when they log in.
Yeah, makes sense. So I see we have another comment from Stacy McConnell. She says that she's been to a lot of different virtual events, and the thing that she found beneficial are bite-sized events where there are engagement opportunities, which I think that makes a lot of sense for sure, because I think we're all kind of tired of like just sitting in front of the computer and having people like talk at us,
Yeah.
So if you can actually make a connection, virtually, I think that's beneficial too.
Yeah, so
but you're going to be tired if it's too long.
Again, so that was one of the reasons we kind of designed this, so that the attendees have the power to kind of control that engagement at each booth. But yeah, I mean, and I'm sure we'll kind of get into this a little bit. It's been said, I haven't seen hard data on this, but the attention span when you're sitting in front of your camera they're telling us a lot less than when you're somewhere live. Now, I kind of equivocate there because, I think that really speaks to the conference environment. If you're listening to a speaker, yeah, I think that's true. But actually what we found in our booths was that for a conversation, when an attendee checked into the video chat of one of our exhibitors, those conversations actually lasted significantly longer than the drive-by conversations you have in an event where you're all standing and kind of, there's a lot going on around you. I mean, I was popping in and out of each booth, of course, during the event. And, when I popped into video chat, I mean, people are at home, they're comfortable. I was seeing people stay in those video chat rooms to talk to our exhibitors for 15, 20 minutes at a time. And so, again, a different type of an event leads to a different, data set. But I do think as a general matter, yeah, I mean, you're going to see, when we start to talk about these hybrid events and what they might look like, I do think you'll see, less of the 60+ minute keynote presentation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think another point I imagine is, at least this is something I find when I go to like a trade show, sometimes it's awkward. Like it can be very busy in the booth, right? There's people crowded all around. You want to try and get a good conversation. And especially if you're a journalist, you're trying to get something quotable, or, maybe even like, record them, and it's so loud, it's so chaotic. It's got to be nice to be able to be like, hey, raise my hand, get the attention, and have that one-on-one, and they're not like looking over at someone else. They're not, they're engaged with you. So I think that could be a positive thing.
So, not to get into the weeds of our platform too much, but we purposefully designed the environment and the engagement so that, for instance, if I pop into a booth and open the video chat and someone else pops into that same booth on their computer and opens to the same exhibitor and opens their video chat, they actually join that conversation, much like a Zoom call. And that was on purpose because that's how it happens at a real event. And the closer we could come to replicating a live media event, the more intuitive it would be for our attendees. And at a live media event, you might be talking to one journalist and the second journalist comes up and kind of, when you're done with your pitch, maybe the second journalist says, hey, I get it, I just had a question, or could you start over? And we wanted to create that. But at the same time, what we were able to do is some companies could use a second video chat functionality and password protect it for private meetings. So the way we kind of explain it, to the extent, anybody out there goes to the big shows like CES, is, that first video chat is your table at a media event. And, like I said, multiple people can join that conversation. That second video chat is actually like that weird little meeting room under your stairs at your CES booth. Right. So we did provide, we wanted to provide for both of those types of interactions.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So as far as like, so there are definitely some benefits of virtual over, in person, but like, what are some of the drawbacks? What are some of the things that you can't really replicate?
Right. You can't replicate, being in the same room, looking someone in the eye and shaking their hands. And, that's not to be dismissive of that. I mean, that's, up until a few months ago, what I had been doing for my career is enabling those types of interactions. So I don't think you can, ever overlook that. And that's why probably, virtual won't replace live. I mean, there's really something to be said for, looking someone in the eyes and speaking to them in person. The other piece of it for me, for us specifically, is, our exhibitors are showcasing gadgets, so there's a real look and feel element. Now, that doesn't preclude what we tried to do, and I think we were pretty successful, is making sure that the exhibitors could share the information, could get the product to the attendee later on, so that they would have it to review it and cover it, write about it, what have you. But again, in my specific type of an event, in this type of an event, these are gadgets, and
yeah, you want to be able to touch it and feel it. And I think that's kind of the same thing in our industry, promotional products, whether it's a t-shirt or, some kind of hard good, like people, there's virtual samples are one thing, but people want to be able to see it and feel it. And, is the t-shirt soft? Is it, how thick is it? Things like that.
But I will say that, the benefits, and we talked a bunch about, the ability to collect data and information and deliver it afterward, which is really the key ones. But, it's companies and attendees are getting very used very quickly to, not having to travel, not having to stay in hotels, from a producer standpoint, not having to rent a venue, not having to worry about F&B, food and beverage, so I think those advantages are being recognized very quickly by both sides of the event industry.
I'm seeing another comment, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, from Danielle Lum. She was talking about how, I think you were mentioning how people can kind of pipe into the video chat. And that she's not a fan of it. It's annoying when someone joins in person and in chat. So I guess it kind of depends on the event and people's preferences, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It can certainly be distracting, annoying, frustrating. I've been to many of these events, live events. But again, that's how it happens at a media event, and we wanted to be able to replicate that, but we were still able to provide the opportunity, which doesn't, excuse the double negative, but doesn't not exist at a live event, to the extent that if somebody comes up to your booth, either you've scheduled something, they're coming by at a certain time, but even if they haven't, but they're really important, top tier tech press, as we say, I mean, you can always kind of pull them aside. It's hard at the tabletop type of an events, but yeah, I mean, Danielle, that's why we wanted to try to account for both of those types of interactions.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I guess I want to bring it towards like our industry of promotional products. How do you think promotional products, swag, giveaways, merch, whatever you want to call it, how does that fit into a virtual event?
Well, I mean, everybody loves swag, so you have to kind of figure it out. Now, we didn't figure it out at the first one, but we certainly had several conversations, and there's certainly people doing some cool things with respect to swag and promotional giveaways. I mean, obviously, your first barrier of entry there is that you've got to get it to the attendee somehow, which means you need to collect their address and then, deal with the shipping logistics on the back end. But I mean, there's a role. We talked about it. I anticipate doing, something with that. We've always done different types of swag bags at our live events. Not just t-shirts, but literally some of the, companies love to give away their products, especially, the less expensive portable chargers and things like that. So we want to figure it out. I think, it has to be relevant. But I think what's important in recognizing its relevance is relevance doesn't mean it has to be a tech gadget, right? Relevance means it needs to, fit into the process, is how I would put it. And I guess what I mean by that is some of the things we kind of tossed around were, not so much sending them a portable charger, although that was part of the conversation. But it was, kind of this notion of like maybe have lunch with us and send them lunch during the event.
Food gifts are huge.
Relevance doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, topic specific in terms of tech gadgets. But I think there are some cool things to do to enhance the experience in that way.
Yeah, definitely, to tie it in. I mean, other things I can think of, obviously, I know we've heard a lot about like those, kits that people, drop ship maybe before the event so that it has a shirt in it that you can wear during the conference. But the actual like companies themselves, maybe they're getting like a branded backdrop for their, booth. Or even another thing is just like the uniforms that they're wearing. You might have to rethink where you put the logo.
Right.
because you're from the like sort of like the neck up. So maybe it goes
Right.
on the collar instead of like lower down on the chest.
No, I mean, that's a good point. Now, I'm glad you brought up this kind of the booth appearance, right? Because we, spent a lot of time on that as well. And, what we landed on was we had kind of a standard virtual booth that you check into their booth and there's kind of a booth backdrop and a little podium. And we were able to, include the exhibitor's logo, alter the color scheme so that the two color scheme, the booth elements and the background had, matched the color scheme of the exhibitors. In a couple cases, we wrapped those elements in different types of graphics for them. And then we actually offer a tier where an exhibitor could just take that screen landscape and design their own thing. So we had a couple of exhibitors do that, and there were no booth elements in it. It looked like a screen, but when you popped into their booth, there were product photos and all kinds of different graphic elements. So they were able to do that. So they both looked really cool, actually. They both came really nicely. I mean, I think the other piece, it's not necessarily related to swag, but the cool thing that, we're talking about a lot is gamification. So kind of been a buzzword for several years now. And, traditionally with trade shows, there are a lot of ways to kind of create incentives to get the attendees to visit more booths and do cool things and create leaderboards for who's visited the most booth, who's visited the most video chats or what have you. So we're excited to kind of dig into that a little bit. I mean, to be honest, for V1, we wanted to make sure the platform worked and those kind of core objectives were able to be met by both the exhibitors and the attendees. But I think gamification is a real exciting area to explore more as well.
Okay. I see a comment from Alfred Poor. That's your partner, right? Business partner?
That is my partner, yes.
He says he'd love to have help from the advertising specialty companies to produce swag bags for the events. So yeah, that would be great. Obviously, we have tons of people that can connect with you guys on that, and that have lots of experience. But I'm actually curious about, people here listening today, like what are have you guys worked on any virtual events for people doing, promotional products? What kinds of things are you seeing? What are the coolest ideas you've seen for virtual events? So if you guys have any examples or ideas that you want to share, that'd be great. I'd love to hear them. So just, comment them out. So obviously, with the coronavirus kind of ongoing, we don't know what's going on. We don't know when things are going to return to the new normal, whatever we want to call it.
The old normal.
The
old normal.
Well, yeah, I don't know when that's going to happen, but even the new normal is not quite here. What do you think things are going to look like next year in terms of events?
Well, next year, I think if you're smart and you want to produce an event, you're going to look and you're going to think and plan a lot along the lines we have. Next year, and forgive me for possibly being a cynic, but COVID's not going away, unfortunately, and I don't want to digress it into an editorial discussion about why that is in our country, but it's not going away. I mean, the numbers are still just frightening, and I don't think, certainly in 2021, that you're going to see a resurgence of live events by any stretch. And I think going beyond that, and we can talk about this, of course, hybrid will be here virtual will be here to stay. And I think the biggest kind of fundamental potential kind of reset of the industry is that virtual isn't brand new, right? I mean, at my live events, one of the things we've really been focused on is helping our exhibitors generate content. And part of that is live streaming. So we've done different types of live streaming from our events with the creator community, the YouTubers, for several years. But the reset is kind of the different roles each of them takes. I mean, it used to be, I guess what I'm saying is it used to be, whereas the virtual piece was kind of the afterthought. What's going to change, I think, is that the live experience is going to be the afterthought. And, whether it's the length of the different programming, the shortening the content sessions, whether it's focusing first and foremost on the platform and then technology and the catering second. But I think that's kind of the reset you're looking at, where people will fundamentally be more focused on the virtual piece of it than the live piece of it.
Okay. I'm going to go back to what you were talking about before about gamification, because I see Danielle Lum has a question. How do you ensure that people are engaging in the game and not just clicking and clicking to get points?
I mean, that's a great question. And to the extent that our live events invite consumers in, that's a real issue. What we've done with our live events, and I'll circle back to the virtual in a minute, but at our live events, I mean, our community of enthusiasts and influencers, but especially enthusiasts, they love tech. So it takes care of itself in a little bit, but they're also consumers, so they love free things as well. We had been pretty successful at our live events, at least from the feedback we've been getting from we've received from exhibitors, in that the enthusiast attendees are very engaged. And a matter of fact, in some cases, we've been told that they ask questions that the press doesn't even think to ask, technical questions like, why did you put the USB port here and not here? So we kind of, trust in that. One of the things we used to say at Digital Life, which was a much bigger event, we used to, if for instance, you had a rack with t-shirts that you were giving away and you gave away your last one, well, then get that rack off your floor, because you don't necessarily want them coming by and seeing it empty, let them wonder whether you had a giveaway in the first place. Having said that, it really takes care of itself even more so in the virtual environment, because we're not inviting consumers and we haven't solved for that yet. We may figure out a way to do something that's open to the public virtually, but when I say it solves itself, I mean, these are members of the press. They have a job to do, and what we're trying to do, obviously, is to help them do their jobs, and they're professionals, and that's maybe not a great answer, but it really does tend to take care of itself.
And we're all in the world now with our kids at home and in the background.
School's over.
So, we started talking a little bit about hybrid events. What do you think a hybrid event is, might look like? How would that be structured?
Well, again, I think, I think the industry will kind of reset itself so that it really plans the event in terms of the environment and the content and what have you for the virtual space. By definition, the virtual element of any event has a potential to reach a lot more people. So I think that makes sense. But I think you will see shorter content sessions. I think you will see, a much bigger emphasis on the technology. At our live events, where again, we really wanted to create incentives for content generation, the network was already very important. But boy, if you're holding a live event that's got a, major virtual component to it, then your network has to be just rock solid. I think things like that. I really think the technology just comes to the forefront. I mean, the neat thing is, and another reason that virtual isn't going away, I mean, virtual isn't going away because of its benefits and advantages that we discussed a little bit, but virtual isn't going away also because it's maturing. And, when we can get back out there and go meet each other in person at live events, all of the investment and the infrastructure and the technological advancements that have been made over the last 6 months don't go away. People, like we talked about earlier, I mean, people are growing accustomed to the benefits of the virtual event environment. And the technology and the platforms have just made leaps and bounds in such a short time.
Yeah, just because of necessity. And I think, it's interesting too, like with the virtual, with the hybrid, you're probably going to capture some people that never were able to go to events. Maybe they couldn't afford to go, or it was just too far for them. So you can kind of expand your reach a little bit when you're doing it virtually.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the major benefits of a virtual event, of course, is the lack of any geographical restrictions on attending. And, we had attendees representing multiple countries, and, the only barrier for them was really the time zone. And we tried to kind of, find a Midland time zone that would not make it prohibitive to log in from anywhere else.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just huge. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
cost savings, but even just the ability, even where cost might not be an issue. And with respect to, with respect to COVID, I mean, you're also looking at, even as we move farther and farther away from the crisis, as it were,
Mhm.
you're looking at, segments of the population that are more at risk that
Mhm.
won't take that chance. They'll be the last, some of the seniors and what have you, they'll be the last to return to live events. And, you know, if you're trying to get in front of journalists, a lot of them are seniors and they're great. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So going, we're talking about like people coming from different countries. I see Patricia Ozma is greeting us from the Republic of Panama. So hi, Patricia. And she says they're preparing for hybrid events and it's a great challenge, but we move forward. I agree with that. We have another comment from Javier Melendez.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry, just to, Patricia, I mean, you're right, and I know he's listening, and just a shout out to Alfred, because, when we first got on a call with On24, this is the story I tell. It's a quick one, but, when they first kind of pulled the curtain back and said, okay, this is how you do this, and this is how, my eyes started to water up, and I was just like, and Alfred kind of sat up in his chair, and I just knew I had the right partner, because he was so anxious to dig in, and he did so much customization. Now, not customization with respect to like designing code and things like that, but he extended, because it's essentially a webinar platform, and we turned it into a trade show essentially. And On24 was actually pretty blown away by what we've done. I mean, I think we're in consideration for an award for extending the use of the platform via customization. He customized all the little icons that you click on.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so you guys made it work for you. So Javier says, consider doing a live event, but having someone purposely walking the floors, allowing for virtual reality for those who can't or don't travel, and the booth vendor doing a booth presentation to that roaming camera person so suppliers can do their pitch while offering great live conversations. So bringing some virtual reality into the live event. That'd be interesting.
A great question and a great point as well. I mean, like, you may have kind of gotten the understanding that we discussed a lot of different things that we, sort of back-burnered until we got this platform rock solid, which we mostly have done. I mean, I think the important thing to kind of note is that, you come away from your first event with a ton of knowledge yourself. And we turned around like within an hour and started to kind of discuss how to improve the experience and how to tweak the platform and from what we learned. But having said that, I mean, VR was a quick discussion at the outset. And, even in our industry, and VR companies, especially on the consumer side of things, are something I'm pretty familiar with. We basically decided real quickly that we would talk about VR again after the first one. But I think there's absolutely something there. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as it continues to get better, I think there'll just be more opportunities for it, because it's not really, I always thought of it as kind of like gimmicky for a while, but it's starting to become more of a, I don't know, a real thing, in my opinion. I don't know, like earlier VR was kind of like, oh, gives me a headache.
Yeah, well,
but
I mean, one of the things they say in our industry, and this goes back even more to my regulatory days than to my experiential days, but you go to CES, and if something at CES is like the end all be all, then it's probably a good 10 years before we're actually going to get to some kind of not just mass adoption, but ease of access and viable use cases.
So we have a question from Nicole Brennan. She says, besides giveaways, are there any other tips or ideas to generate more engagement?
Well, giveaways, the gamification elements, which we didn't do, but, not to kind of fall back on the same answer I kind of gave before in terms of solving itself, but we're helping both of our communities, our exhibitors and attendees, do their job. And, when we showed the platform before the event to some of the press, they immediately said, this is the first virtual event that's going to help me do my job. I don't have to log in and sit through a 60-minute presentation for a 5-minute Q&A. I decide who I want to visit. I decide who I want to engage with. So, I mean, it's not a great answer, and I apologize, but in our world, in our environment, that takes care of itself, because the tech press need to talk to the tech companies, and the tech companies need to show their products to the tech press. I think creating as many different touch points as possible is important. So, but that also dovetails into the need to really educate everybody. But in one of our booths, you can group chat, you can video chat, you can send a direct email, you can fill out one of those product review request forms.
Yeah. Well, I
You
think,
have a module
something,
where you can access the contact info from the company.
right. Well, I mean, something you kind of touched on, because you keep, you're saying it's for journalists, this is they're doing their job, we're helping them do their job. So I guess, whatever the event is, it's important to know who is coming. You know what I mean? Like, know the audience and what they actually want, what their needs are. So if you can kind of like profile them, maybe.
Yes, absolutely. And not
that,
only
that
that,
you can cater to what they want.
not only that, but I've talked a lot about educating the attendees in terms of kind of the technology and the platform itself. But even in a more traditional sense, in one of these types of events, it's critical to allow to get the information about who's going to be there exhibiting to the attendees. And I mean, that's something we've always done at live events as well. At this event, the show floor actually had a pull down menu where you could sort the exhibitors by category. So if your beat is audio, you could click on, pull down, click audio, and you'd see which exhibitors had audio products.
Right. You didn't have to waste your time going to people that are not going to be relevant to.
I mean, the funny thing was that, the press, we're so kind of anxious and excited for this type of an event that when I do a live event, a lot of the press will tell me, well, when you send me the exhibitor list, I cover audio. If there's some audio companies, I'll try to make it by, because a lot of the press obviously have specific beats. Right. At this event, we really didn't find that because, the barrier to entry is so low. So even if they were, covering specific beats, they were saying, oh, this looks cool, I'll definitely check it out. I mean, it's a couple hours out of my day on a Wednesday. So we didn't run into that kind of hurdle for getting them into the room, as it were. But yes, critical to, make the attendee's job as easy as possible.
Yeah. So I see another question from Acrobat Branding Group. What have you seen used as the most productive vehicle or tool to avoid attendee burnout, especially for larger online events?
Well, that's a great question. I'm not sure I have a really great answer. I mean, I have attended, a fair amount of virtual events, primarily since, we've all been locked down. Alfred attends even more and participates in them as a speaker or what have you. So Alfred, if you're there and you have a good response to the Acrobat Branding Group, maybe you would want to chime in. I do think, keeping, again, especially in a conference environment, it's really important to keep that a little bit shorter, because even though we drew the distinction between the one-to-one engagements we have in our video chat rooms versus a conference, if it's a virtual conference, then I mean, you want to shorten that up and tighten that up. And then obviously it's critical, and there's a zillion tools to allow that online audience to engage with that speaker or that conference, ask questions, and similar to what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and I think I actually have a virtual conference that I'm going to be attending in a couple of days, and typically if it's in person, it's only maybe 2 or 3 days, but they decided to stretch it out over 2 weeks. But it's only like a couple of hours each day, so maybe that's a way to help. Like, you kind of squeeze in the sessions you want to go to, but you don't have to just like be on for like 3 days. You can still get some like regular work done, maybe in the morning, and then in the afternoon, attend the event.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. To the extent you have kind of a really big content heavy type of, I can't come up. I've seen a couple of virtual events that, traditionally were, full day events, kind of do that type of thing. And, one of the things we are able to do is to, the exhibitors can record their video chats. They can live stream their video chats. But they can even replay their booth in its entirety. And that's a little wonky after V1. We're just kind of learning how best to do that, because obviously your booth is live, and to the extent you've been playing product videos or promotional videos, you can still do all that. But after the event, if somebody clicks on the video chat, there's not going to be anybody in the room to talk to them. So we're still trying to figure out what the benefit of that is. But it's kind of neat. And I know that several of our exhibitors have used it as kind of an internal proof point.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
hey, I senior executive. Speaking of which, another of the benefits, right, is that you know at CES, at least on day one and day two, maybe it is different. But traditionally, your senior executives aren't necessarily going, unless you're a startup and it's a small team or what have you, but aren't necessarily going to these types of an events. But now, virtually, they're not, they're not being forced to spend 2 days away from the office and travel to go to an event where they're, talking with the press. So now, all of a sudden, senior executives are able to participate in these media events, and that makes the interactions with the press more meaningful.
Right, right, yeah. Well, I mean, as someone in the press, I definitely, want to talk to somebody that's, higher up and, can say more.
But I also think, one of the critical elements is the moderators. I mean, you're doing a great job. I mean, interspersing the comments and getting the audience's questions in. You've obviously done this before. I think that's critical. I mean, to the extent it's a panel or what we call a fireside chat, a one-on-one. Now more than ever, and this started to become more important even before the lockdown, but now more than ever, it is critical that your moderator understand the tools and has the personality and the capability to engage with that virtual audience.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it's so much easier to, click off, right? I think that's the other thing. It's like, if you're at a chat or people will notice you stand up and walk out. But if you just, if you just leave the chat, it's much easier to just drop out virtually. So you have to be more I guess more engaging than, I mean, you should be engaging anywhere you are, of course, but it's easier for people to leave, I think.
No, but that's a good point. It does. That's a good point, which we've kind of danced around, but not necessarily addressed. I mean, shorten the content sessions, yes, but the speaker themselves needs to understand the virtual element to their presentation. And, it's never a great idea to stand up and go through a PowerPoint, even in a live event environment. But, now you potentially have the capability, depending on how it meshes, if it's in a hybrid environment, how it meshes with the live audience, but to show videos. And, speakers do that in live events anyway, lights down, here, check this video out. But now, to the extent that it's a hybrid environment, you really want to kind of think outside the box and understand what you can do within your presentation to engage that audience as well.
Yeah. We have another comment I wanted to just bring up from Javier about incorporate things like social media call outs using hashtags and then offering swag for the most likes. So I think that's a really cool idea for sure, because
that's an element of gamification. And I will say, Javier, one of the things we didn't spend a ton of time focusing on, which was very different from one of my live events, was social. So that's a big kind of something we want to address. I mean, again, not to get too granular in the booths, but the companies can have links to outside sites from within their booth. Click here, you'll go to the company website. We made them aware that they could use those external links, those icons that you'd click on for social. And we could even customize them so the little Twitter bird was on one that went to Twitter and what have you. But there's so much more. And at our live events, I mean, we run, contests that require hashtag usage and things like that. So we think there's a ton more we can do there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think, any way you can, for our purposes, of course, any way you can kind of incorporate that swag and the giveaways and in different, new and different ways, like that's just only going to make people more engaged and more interested, for sure.
And just to close the loop, at our live events, that's how you enter the contest. So, Javier has the exact right idea. We didn't necessarily do it for most likes. We purposefully did kind of a random selection, but to be entered, you had to post on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and you had to use that hashtag. And we even kind of found a way with some software on the back end, and we made this clear to the attendees. If all it is the hashtag and a tweet, then you need to say something. You need to.
Yeah. Don't just say hi, but add to the conversation somehow.
Exactly.
So I think we kind of covered a lot so far, but do you have any final thoughts or kind of advice you want to leave with our listeners about the future of events, where things are going, what's going to work?
I think that one takeaway that gets short shrift, is that short? Is that, you know, setting aside the reason we're here, and God knows it's not easy to set that aside, but it's actually a really exciting time for events. You know, that's the takeaway. I mean, you know, the virtual, and you know, beyond live streaming, I hadn't thought about producing an entirely virtual event ever before the pandemic. And you know, what we've seen and the advances we've seen over the last few months, I mean, it's actually a super cool time for events. And I think the future is going to be you know, really amazing when we and there's not one answer, but when we begin to really explore what the hybrid event format could look like.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great way to end it, because, you know, talking about events, I think for so many people right now has been kind of all doom and gloom. We're only seeing like the bad side. We can't be around people. We can't shake hands. We can't hug. We can't, you know, go to these events. But there are these benefits to virtual, and there are some exciting things happening for sure. So I think it's great.
Ultimately, if we can meld those benefits with the things we love about live events, then that's going to be pretty exciting.
For sure. Okay. All right. Well, it was so great talking with you today. I'm so glad you were able to, you know, share your experiences, and I'm glad we were able to have this chat. So, and everyone, thank you so much for commenting. I just want to, you know, end this by mentioning one more time our sponsor, Maple Ridge Farms. So 3 people who, you know, gave these very insightful comments will be getting coffee cakes in the mail. So thank you so much. I will, you know, be in contact with the winners shortly. But again, I'm Teresa Hagel, executive editor of digital content at ASI, and I was with Barry Myers today, founder of Get Geeked Media.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody who tuned in.
All right. Thanks so much.